Welcome to Odyssey's Influencer Insights, your go-to place for anything influencers. Let's jump right in. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Odyssey's Influencer Insights. Today, I'm super excited to introduce Brian Clevesy, a talented travel outdoor photographer. Brian is a senior marketing manager by day, but he's also known for his photography. When he captures stunning visuals, he tells powerful stories through his photography. He's worked with major brands like BMW, Jameson, and BodyArmor. He's created impactful, purpose-driven content that stands out in a very saturated market. Today, we'll dive into Brian's journey of balancing dual careers, his mantra of creating with purpose, and what it takes to build a meaningful brand partnership and become a successful creator. Brian, welcome to the show.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Ezra. Quite the hype up front. I appreciate that.
Of course, well deserved. So, yeah, just, you're obviously doing a lot. I'd love to kind of bring it back a little bit and hear about your upbringing. I saw that you grew up in a small town in Massachusetts.
Yeah.
I'm butchering the pronunciation, but I'd love to hear a little bit about kind of how you grew up and what got you into what you're doing now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty crazy story. So I grew up, yeah, super small town. No grocery store. Have had to go
Wow.
to another town for that. Yeah, about 6,000
Crazy.
people. One stoplight to get into the next town where the grocery store was. And a lot of family friends. My parents still live in the same house they have for 43 years. And so,
Very cool.
yeah, very small town life. And so back when I was growing up, I think the influence around my creativity was my dad used to do photography just casually. And so he still has all his own like film kits and everything, and home videos was where it all started. So, but they kept chronicles of this stuff. They still have it. And so I'd be running around with a camera and everything. And then on vacations, they would give me the little point and shoot crank like
Mm.
flash cameras. And so
Yeah.
I don't know, it was always super interesting to me. And in when as I kept growing up and doing stuff in small towns with friends, like playing in the snow, and I got super into like board sports. Started making like these really terrible edits of us snow skating, snowboarding, and just, finding spots to go hit rails and make jumps and stuff. And so that's how it all started. And then life just really picked up. I played soccer my whole life, tried the pro route after college and did some trials and stuff. And so I got really far away from creative work. I leaned into career, school, sports, like things that I feel like I was pushed towards more so. Um, and it wasn't until I was about 23, 24 years old. I maybe a little older, like 25, 26. I went on a bachelor party to Vegas, where most bachelor parties happen, I feel like. And I came home and I was really sick. And I thought, being out in Vegas, got sick or got a bug from something, and I had a fever for 9 days. And I went to the hospital, and they're like, "Whoa, you shouldn't have waited this long." And so I got some antibiotics, sent me home, fever went away. The minute I finished those antibiotics, like same day, fever came back. I was like, wow, something's really wrong. So I was
Mm-hmm.
actually at work, working a normal job, and on my way home, I just got this horrific pain and I was just writhing in my lungs. And so I went into the hospital. My girlfriend at the time had brought me, and they said, "We've never seen anything like this. Your lungs it has a growth in it the size of a baseball with a golf ball inside of it, and it's filling with fluid." And first natural question is like, "Do I have cancer? Like, what is this?" And they said, "We do not know." He said, "I've worked here 23 years. I've never seen anything like this." So, long story short, every hour that was going by, my health was deteriorating. I was in the hospital about 3, 4 days, and it got to a point where they had brought the chaplain in as like a final prayer, like this might be it. And so I just remember like my parents were crying and super upset, and I just said like, if I see the outside of this hospital, what's one thing I wish I did? And it was pick up a camera again, like get
Mm-hmm.
into creative work. And so, that kind of last day or two stretch where they're like, this is kind of make or break, they had found out what it was. It's a fungal infection called valley fever, which is common in the Southwest, not common back in New England. So they
Mm-hmm.
took them a while to figure out what was wrong with me. And yeah, after that, I spent most of my very little savings at the time to buy my first, like, more serious setup for photo, video, drone, and said, "Let's do this. You have a second chance. Let's get after it."
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And if you don't mind me asking, is it okay now with your health?
Yeah. So what's funny is they said that they said my lungs will be published in medical books. My pulmonologist was like, this is wild.
Wow.
There's a very rare manifestation of this fungal infection. And so for a year afterwards, I had to have antifungal treatment, which is expensive, but, like, what's the alternative? I don't make it. So
Mm-hmm.
it wasn't a question, and family helped out and stuff. And so they said that forever I would have this kind of fossilized growth in my lung. Because I asked, like, well, can't you just take it out? And they said, if like an active case of valley fever, it's kind of seen as like a bio warfare agent, which I'm like, all right, what is going on? So they're like, yeah, we'd have to fly in a hazmat team from DC, like they'd have to dispose of it the correct way. So I was like, okay, I guess this is just staying here. And then I got like a head cold or so. I got like a sinus infection when I first moved to LA, and I told them about my history with my lungs and stuff, and they did an X-ray, and they're like, "Yeah, there's no sign of it. They look super healthy." So I actually defied those odds too, that
Well,
there would be no remnants of it. So yeah, I think I'm back. I think I'm back. Yeah. So
yeah,
that
that's
was
amazing.
pretty wild.
Yeah, no, I'm very happy to hear that.
Thank you.
And
Me too.
and what and what was that like? So after your experience in the hospital, you decided, I took that long break from being creative in photography, and now you want to get back into that. What was that period like where you're starting to get back into that photography and getting that drone and things like that?
That was so fun. I mean, it's hard, man. Like, you get caught up in life, you get caught up in responsibility, and it was this immediate feeling of like, wow, like this is such a cool outlet for me, and to be able, like, so the first thing I did was a road trip up the coast of New England all the way through Maine to this tiny island in Canada, and one of my good friends Zach came with me because he's like, hell yeah, let's just do it. We didn't have much responsibility, and so the first thing I did was do like that, after I bought it. I think like the next week or two, took a road trip and just started creating like more lifestyle content, two guys just adventuring through the wilderness of Maine and Canada, and
Hmm.
put together this really cringy edit now when I look back. But at the time, everyone's like, holy shit, this is so, can I swear a little
Yeah,
bit?
yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, that reaction is, was so reassuring. It was so motivating because it's creative work is so tangible. Even though we live in this very digital first world, like, there is this tangible piece, this tangible outcome that you create this, and you get to have those memories with friends, and it just fills a lot of different buckets. So yeah, the buzz was high for sure.
Hmm. Sure. And then, um, so now, so yeah, moving into what you're doing now, now you're working both as a
Yeah.
marketing professional and as a photographer. So, first, what's that like, both of those careers and balancing doing both of those, pretty time consuming and intense things.
Yeah, yeah, those are great adjectives for them. They are very time consuming, and very different in
Hmm.
different ways.
Sure.
So I've I went to school for marketing. That's what I got my degree in. I've
Hmm.
worked in marketing as a professional for the last 10, 12 years. And so I've amassed a lot of experience in both branding and pretty like branding, content marketing, demand generation, and I've worked largely for B2B tech companies. So again, we're getting out of even like direct to consumer, like lifestyle brands. It's very techy, very usually advanced technologies. The company I'm at now, AI voice biomarker technology. So it's pretty nerdy stuff. And so for me, the balance here is like I get to use a big portion of my brain for very pragmatic problem solving, framework development, pretty traditional go to market and marketing needs, kind of being a quasi head of marketing in tech. And then on the flip side, I can apply a lot of that to the conversations I have around creative work because I know what it's like to work at a company. I understand positioning, product pricing, like the different models within marketing. And so I felt like, although my following's not huge, the conversations I'm able to have with marketing teams or teams that are working on branded assets, they're like, oh, wow, okay, you know your stuff. So that's actually, I feel like, helped me get into those conversations
Interesting.
more successfully and to a degree where I'm comfortable with it and I don't have a huge following, so that's not opening the door for me. It's more my experience as a marketer and a creative. And then on the flip side, the creative work, it's a totally different bucket of fulfillment of work. It's a much more creative outlet. And while yeah, you can apply frameworks and stuff, it's much more free flowing. It's there's less rules to the game. So I find enjoyment being able to do both of those things, and they do fill pretty much all my time.
Mm-hmm. And a question I have there that I'm curious about is that, like what you're saying on the marketing side, what the skills that you've learned from there have been beneficial for your photography and your content creation, creativity there. Have you ever
Yeah.
thought about putting more time into that photography and creative side and kind of shifting full time into that? And why or why not?
Yeah, 100%. I think that's been a long-term goal of mine. I think for me, it walks this balance. And candidly, I'm a little bit scared in a few ways, I think.
Hmm.
I'm definitely human. Um, I grew up, not poor, but not with a ton necessarily. And so for me, it's like I've got this reflex or this recall where it's like, what does taking that leap look like? Especially when I have developed a career in marketing. I went into a significant amount of student loan debt to get my degree, about $126,000 in debt. And so I think that's a very real thing. You see these creators, you see this survivorship bias of like, well, I've done this, and it's huge in LA. It's like,
Hmm.
just chase your dreams, do this. And it's like, I get that, I do, and I do feel that manifestation is a strong thing. However, I think there's also a little bit of realism there. It's like there is no shame in working a job to be able to buy new gear, to go do those creative projects and use them as slowly but surely building your portfolio. I mean, before I was taken even remotely serious, it was about 4 years of chipping away. And so I'm now at this tipping point, and I'm 33 years old, by the way. So if anyone's listening and you're younger and you think, oh man, I'm 23, I'm so behind, like don't feel that way at all. I think time's a crazy thing. Age is what you make it. If I quit my job today as a professional marketer and went straight photography in 10 years, I'm 43. That's totally fine, and I'm a like seasoned veteran. That's just crazy to me. It's like I don't see age as a barrier at all. I have not really once thought of it as a limiting factor for me, but yeah, anyway, to kind of circle out that point, I think I'm working on my own pace, and I think that's incredibly important too, I've felt that FOMO. I've felt that like interior struggle of like, well, why don't you just go for it? It's like I'm not no one's holding me to this timeline. It's all completely made up. And so to apply pressure to myself that might be unnecessary or stressful, I don't think is conducive to getting to where you want to go because the last thing I want is to hate creative work because it's what I need to pay the bills. Right
Hmm.
now, I get to do that at my leisure and be a little bit more picky about the type of creative work I do because that was a big part of the early journey too. It's like you got to build a portfolio. I was saying yes to everything. I was doing a wedding for $500 and now it's 10x that. So I don't see myself as losing anything really in managing both right now. I think I'll feel the moment when it's the right time for me and not get too stressed about what other people are thinking. I think that comes with age too.
Hmm. Yeah, I truly love that answer. I feel like it just felt kind of so raw and honest, especially because, like we were saying, I feel like on social media a lot you kind of see that flip side where people are trying to pressure you. You see, even me, I'm 22, I just graduated university, and part of me feels like I have so much time. And then you also do see these, early 20s with all that success on social media, and then you start thinking, why not me? Am I behind?
Yep.
Um, and kind of just chasing those dreams in that aspect. So I found that very interesting how you answered that, and I completely agree. So I'd love to hear more about what you're doing right now on that photo and creative side, because I know you're doing a wide range. You touched on the wedding, and I see you do
Yep.
wedding landscapes, couples, families. You're doing a lot, right? So can you talk a little bit more about what that area is like right now?
Yeah, for sure. I think it's interesting. I never like wanted to do weddings. I kind of fell into it through word of mouth. And the more I've done them, and maybe, I don't know, I'm getting mushier with my age, but there's something so incredibly special about being trusted to capture the biggest moments of someone's life
Hmm.
and do it in a way that has your own unique twist on it. I think, yeah, it's a very saturated market, but if I can add these lifestyle or documentary like elements to really stunning visuals, that it feels good. I don't know how else to say it. I think wedding or couples or families or whatever, I think I will forever try to do some portion of that. But like most things in life, I don't love being put in a single box. I'm not super linear. And so I will do them. They're amazing. They're super fun and really challenging in healthy ways. And the tangible outcome and the tangible reactions and feedback that you get from folks are unlike any other, campaign or brand that I've worked with because while you work with a brand and the team will be stoked about the results, there's something about someone's life,
Hmm.
their livelihood that it's hard to explain, but every time I do a wedding, I'm like, oh, I'm so drained. It's a ton of work and the edits
Hmm.
are gnarly, but um, when you get that reaction and the tears and the FaceTimes and all this really reinforcing and positive feedback, like you've made our lives, so special with this, it's hard to be like, yeah, screw these. It does feel good. Now, on the flip side, I think with brand work, I think that's become incredibly saturated,
Hmm.
which is fine. It's not a cop out for me. If you do good work, if you position yourself well, you will get jobs. Um, your network is huge. It will always be who you know, what connections you have. Maybe people can challenge that, but in any industry I've worked in for, most of my life, I've seen that be the case. Again, of course, if you put together a strong portfolio, a personal brand, a company brand, like you create that luck for yourself too. Having a network doesn't help. That's what I will say there. And so I think for me, where I've tried to think about other ways to position my creative efforts is what are industries that maybe haven't been super disrupted yet through creative work, photo, video. And for me, I was thinking about this and it's like creatives gravitate towards the sexy things. I want to work with McLaren. I want to work with Bugatti. I want to work with beautiful destinations. Like, and that's dope. And I agree. Like, that would be sick. I then had this thought or this realization, like, but while all the eyes are here, what about the unsexy,
Yeah,
traditionally
very smart.
unsexy stuff? And so, I've started networking with the trades, before and
Mm.
afters, like landscapers, things like that. And again, like the thing I'll say is you do not need a big following to make money doing this. You need good work product, you need a strong network. That totally works too. I know people with followers the same size as me, the 3 to 5 range, whatever, who are making more money than someone with 25K because they know how to grind, they know how to position themselves, and they found like niches that are powerful. So for me, my creative journey, it's realizing like Yeah, the shiny stuff, the sexy brands are fun to work with. They are cool, and I still will forever think I'll pursue that as well as like the wedding stuff and families to get those feel good moments. But there's also diversification. It's like where everyone else is looking, what are the other opportunities to capitalize too? So from a creative standpoint, that's where my sights are set for a little, I think.
That's extremely smart. Yeah, I feel like hopefully people are listening to this because I feel like they could take away a lot there. And for those people, let's say you're someone that's, you're loving photography, video, whatever creative thing you're doing, and let's say on that social media you're not seeing that much results. You're seeing all these other people you're comparing that have more followers than you, and you're saying that like their followers doesn't necessarily equate to success in that sense. What would you tell those people how they can kind of compete and get work if, let's say, this is kind of an area where they're just getting their feet wet and they don't really know much about, and how to get those brand collaborations, work in weddings or what have you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, and it's an interesting one because I am not immune to this either. I see people, I'm aligned with, I have creator friends who have gone all in and they
Hmm.
do see the results and it's like, damn, like what if I just go for it? But again, I think there's a little bit there, like there's realistic expectation setting, there's goal setting, and I think those are healthy things. Again, like never let anyone knock you for doing the work it takes to get to the work you want.
Hmm.
That's like a baseline. So for me, like I've been chipping away at that for 5, 6 years. Like that's fine. Again, these self-imposed, these made-up timelines because we live in a FOMO culture, whatever it may be, that's come with age. It's come with maturity and realization. But I think to get that work, to get your feet wet, spec work is a beautiful thing. I did a ton of spec work. Fortunately, again, my network was able to afford me those opportunities. So a lot of my friends in LA and outside of, like, they're well connected and they've looped me in and they've wanted me to get exposure to these opportunities. And so it definitely did not happen on my own. I'll never be the one to say I single-handedly created all these opportunities for myself. I met a lot of incredibly talented people, well-connected people, just by being genuine, going in with no ulterior motives and just trying to be a good person, and that got me really far. I don't know how else to explain it. But what's funny is I had this is a good example for folks, especially younger who may be listening. I think to your question, Ezra, I think to get in, it's a lot of networking in the right ways. Do not be a schmoozer. Do not like just don't. It won't get you far. It's cringy. I've seen it happen. And so I think the way you carry yourself and the way you build a network genuinely will get you really far, especially starting out. So I had followed this guy, Daniel Malachiar's work uh, for years. He runs MGX Creative with Karam, his business partner, and I had known their work for years before I moved to LA. They were a big formative piece of Marshmallows branding and working with the Marshmallow group, the team there. And so when I moved to LA, I was there for 2 months, 3 months, and I saw him at the Victorian for a day party. And I was like, that's definitely him. And my friend, I told him, I was like, I think this is this guy I've been following for a long time. He does great creative work and, director and photography is phenomenal. And he's like, well, go say hi to him then. I was like, hmm, yeah, guess that's an option always. So I went up and just introduced myself and said, "Hey, man, are you Daniel?" He said, "Yep." I was like, "Oh, I'm a huge fan of your work. Like, I've followed you for years, and I think it's really cool what you guys are doing and bringing to the music video world." And he's like, "Dude, this is so crazy. No one ever recognizes me. No one knows that I'm behind a lot of this stuff." Calls over his girlfriend, calls over his friend. He's like, "Hey, he knows me just from," and mind you, like he's a Fujifilm ambassador. He's got the cred to deserve, recognition. And he said, do you work in this space?" And I was like, "Yeah, kind of," because I didn't feel super confident in my abilities. I had just moved to LA, picked up a camera the year before, and I was like, "Yeah, trying, trying to see what kind of opportunities are out here in LA. And he's like, dude, let me get your cell phone. Like, let me get your number. I'll definitely keep you in mind. 2 days later, I'm literally walking into work. I'm 10 feet from the door and I get a phone call and it's Daniel. I was like, oh shit, I gotta answer this. And he's like, hey man, I'm on a huge shoot right now out in Diamond Bar. Can you make it out here in the next like hour and a half? And I'm at the door of work. I have this opportunity and I'm like, it's truly like a movie situation of which decision do I make? This is my fate. And so I called my boss. I was like, yeah, I'll be there. Call my boss. I'm like, hey, I'm super sick. Can't come in. Turn around. And people literally told me like the next day, hey, we saw you like walk up to work and then you went home. What happened? Didn't have to explain myself too much. But yeah, so I ended up going out to that shoot. Got to work with Chris Comstock, who, is Marshmallow. I'm not blowing any big cover there. It's kind of public knowledge. But yeah, I got to work behind the scenes, and that was my first like big exposure to a big music video production. And it just completely changed my creative trajectory, my world, like my view of everything. And it was just because I like admired his work and was nice about it. And I didn't ask for anything. There was no ask. It was just all love. And we still are friends to this day. He's coming to my wedding in about 6 months or so. We stay in touch very frequently. And so it's just a great example of how if you genuinely put yourself out there and you do spec work and you do the things that are required with super low ego, no ulterior motives. I feel like it's when you try to take those shortcuts and try to basically take advantage of people. I've never seen that pan out super well for folks.
Yeah, I love that. And just a quick note there, for someone that's listening, if they're not familiar with spec work, can you explain what that would be?
Yeah, that's a great clarifying question. So spec work is like I want to work with Hydro Flask. I want to work with Bose. I want to work with any brand, whatever it may be. Um, Go buy a Hydro Flask. They're about $30 and go film it with your friends. Go take photos and package that up as if you are getting paid to do that gig. Put in the same effort you would. Put time into the story, whether it's photo or video. Just come up with a really cool campaign and take into account like what trends are going around. Like I think for video, we're seeing a lot of like retro, grainy, like slow shutter stuff going around.
Hmm.
Like start to implement some of those things. If you see that brands aren't quite up to that trend or whatever, put your own creative spin on it. I think it's a cool opportunity to feel very little pressure. You get to create that. They're not asking anything of you, but the doors it can open, both with that brand and others. So I've actually done spec work where it didn't get me work with that company, but a company in that, a brand in that space. And like that's all you need is a door opener. Someone on that team to believe in you. And then you're like, wow, I just landed a paid gig. This is crazy. This makes no sense. And then yeah, it feels pretty cool. So
Hmm.
spec work is just doing unpaid work in the niche or the category that you want to, uh, knowing that it will be a portfolio piece at the very least, something that you can show. I've done this. I can do this. Here's my vision for this.
Yeah, that's great advice. 'Cause I feel like a lot of people that are starting out, um, brand work can seem like a big hurdle or scary and not even sure really how to enter that. But I guess there you get practice for doing brand work. So if someone does reach out or you get a gig, you're not just not sure at all where to start. Plus you
Exactly.
can build that relationship with those different brands. So that's great. Um,
Exactly.
and I see that, like I mentioned at the beginning, you've worked with numerous brands, some very big. Was that spec work that got you into that, or how did you land like collaborations with brands like BMW or Jameson?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. It's a lot of it is, again, network. Like I don't have
Hmm.
a very big following, but I never saw that as a huge barrier either. And so a lot of my friends in LA, they were on reality TV. They're huge TikTok influencers, like millions of followers. And it's funny because again, like I just organically bumped into these people And I'll never forget my friend Jay Starrett. He was on Survivor, and then
Hmm.
MTV's The Challenge, and he's gone big on TikTok for all of his videos there. And we kind of came up together a little bit in the LA scene. Like he definitely had made it a lot more than I ever have. But being on TV and stuff and being recognized, going out places, but I didn't know who he was. And so when I first went over to his place, I just like walked in, sat on the couch, and he's like, "Hey man, who are you? Like, what do you do?" And I was like, "Oh, I take photos." And he's like, "Hmm, I need a photographer." I was like, "All right, my schedule's pretty wide open. I just moved to LA, so I don't really know anybody." And we just hit it off. And I didn't realize he was like on TV for probably a week or so. I think until he told me. I can't remember honestly, but he's like, "That's why I fuck with you. Because you didn't treat me any differently. You're just my friend, and you had no motive, and you're not like, oh, Jay, like, because I'd see it from people we'd know, people like trying to use him to get to an opportunity or something. And I think, again, like, people are not stupid. Intuition's an interesting thing, and I feel like they can sniff that out a lot. And you see it a lot. And not just LA, it's literally anywhere. Just don't bring that vibe to the engagement, is what I would say. And so through those like organic connections, I've had multiple friends who I was meeting in LA who had some level of, popularity or fame. And they're just like, "You're just Brian, man." You like, because my policy was like, respect people, be nice to them, don't take disrespect, and so I'd kind of just tell people how I felt, and they found that as somewhat refreshing as a Northeaster, moving out to the West Coast. And that just me being who I was, and again, like not trying to impress anyone or be anything I wasn't, um, it got me, a lot of these relationships, and organically my network grew. And so through those, I started getting the calls like, "Hey, I've got this big shoot. Like, do you want to be the photographer for it?" Hey, and through them, then the referrals were like, "Hey, I've got this photographer. Hey, I've got this videographer." And then I was interfacing directly with brands. And then the craziest one is I worked with a headphone company, Shocks, and they're pretty big. It's funny because I see them everywhere when I travel still now. Like, and I'd worked with a friend on a campaign with them a year and a half, 2 years later, their creative team reached out to me directly and said, "Hey, Brian, you shot this campaign a couple of years ago, right?" But it was through my friend, so they didn't know for sure. And I said, "Yep, those are me." And they said, "Hey, we love this. We want to run this back like monthly, quarterly." So I got a really strong retainer with them from work I had done years before, again, as kind of like a favor for a friend, made a couple $100 or something up front. But years later, it just blossomed into this really cool relationship with them and got to do work with them like on a retainer basis. So yeah, that's honestly how I got a lot of it was, and other people will say there's definitely a push and a pull here. The push is, here's my pitch deck, here's my work. Like, yes, I could do way more of that and have way more creative gigs. And that's on me. And that's on any creative listening. Like, it is on you to take that onus and drive forward your passion and drive forward your workload. There's the other side that takes a much longer time to build, and that's that organic network. It's being a good person, trying to be a good friend and align creatively with people who are like-minded, and that pays dividends over time.
And what's that relationship like between that push and that pull? Like, does I guess the pull happens from the push? So if let's say you're starting, let's say like you move to LA and you've got no relationships with anyone, and like what you're saying here, so many of these big gigs have come by meeting the right people and they're connecting you to others. So if you're in that spot where you don't have those relationships, would you say it's mostly starting out with the push, pushing to new people, pushing to brands, and then as a result, you'll kind of get that pull, hopefully over time by building up your reputation?
I'd agree with that. Yeah, I think that's about right. I think push in the right way.
Mm-hmm.
Push may have a negative connotation. Maybe it's guide. I don't know.
Hmm.
But yes, I do think the pull comes. The
Yeah.
pull comes over time, and it's when you prove yourself on a personal, social level, a creative level, the output you produce as well. And so by doing the work, the push to network with like-minded people, to network with brands or do spec work or whatever it may be. Now, I'm not saying you necessarily have to go to brands and say, "Hey, I'll do free work for product." I think that's a slippery slope. At the beginning, it's
Mm,
fine for a few times. However, there is a bit of saturation in the market. You'd be surprised at how many big brands don't pay. And
yeah.
that's really discouraging. And so you've got to sniff out the right opportunities for sure. And it's a numbers game. I think what can get discouraging is the push, the push, and nothing coming out of that. And so I think um, that's where the network piece can come in really well to offset that. Because there's like warm outreach and cold outreach.
Hmm.
That's how it's always going to be. Those warm connections, 9 out of 9 times, will get you farther than the cold outreach. But again, take the time to build the portfolio. Things will come. And it's this point I was making earlier where, and I think Ezra, you had mentioned this too, even in your situation, it's so hard to feel like you're ever ahead,
Hmm.
especially with
Yeah.
social media. You see the highlight reel of what everyone posts, but I'm telling you, I've met creators who have six-figure followers, seven-figure followers, and I've met ones that are living paycheck to paycheck, totally
Mm,
grinding it out. So, and you see this highlight reel, and it's like, yeah, I know you're struggling, and that's okay, but I think it's important for people to know everything that is posted is mostly the highlight reel, unless it's this,
mhm.
outspoken piece of like, hey, this isn't the reality. I am struggling, which I think we both know which content gets posted a little bit more than the other. Yeah.
For sure. And segueing into, I'd love to hear more about your content. You've been talking about your content you do. Yeah, I just want to hear more about that. I mean, you've got amazing photography kind of all around the world, amazing pieces. I'd
Yep.
love to hear more about that. Yeah, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah. So travel has always been interesting to me. Road trips, especially, were like our mode of mode of vacationing when I was younger. Again, like my family grew up, not poor, but getting by, I think, a little
Hmm.
bit. And so, we didn't fly all that often. It was mostly local road trips and stuff to go see things. And I just, there's something about the experience and the emotion you feel at it, like a national park, like a Yosemite or something.
Hmm.
For me, the first big one that did it for me was Zion. And I've got a tattoo that's like a panorama I took wrapped around my arm here of
Oh,
Angel's
very
Landing.
That's cool.
And it's just, there's something about it, just it humbles you to be in these incredibly beautiful locations and see things that some people will never get a chance to see in their lives. And again, maybe my perspective is totally skewed or changed because of what I've gone through with the health scare. And I think it's just with any work you do, with the work I do, it's being incredibly grateful for the opportunity to even be able to touch it, get close to it. And
Hmm.
so for me, a big goal has been to travel the world, obviously, but even more locally, there's a lot of natural beauty in the US. We have 63 national parks. I plan to hit every single one and document it through my lens. And so I think when people think of creative work, really, I'll back it up, any work, we think of legacy. What are we going to leave behind? Some people amass tons of money, some people amass fame. For me, I've thought a lot about this, and I could sell 1 million prints of my landscapes. I could sell one. I think one of the coolest things I could work on would be to capture every single national park through my lens and have that as like a coffee table book. Again, if it sells out, phenomenal. If it's a hand-me-down for my family, they've got to see years and years and years after I'm gone. the adventures I was able to have and to inspire people to go see these places. Because, and again, I think a big part of what's fueled me is people I grew up with or family or whoever it may be reaching out to me and saying like, what you're doing is so awesome. These photos are so incredible, and it never gets old, it just never does. I don't care who you are, but to be able to inspire literally anyone to go take that initiative, whether it's creatively, travel, whatever, like that's why I think like for me, checking these different buckets of creative, like weddings or travel photography or brand videography, I think the ability to inspire is what fuels me so much. When I'm feeling unmotivated, which totally happens, when I'm feeling burnt out, and then I'll post something or I'll share something, and the feedback you get from that of like, wow, you know, I'm traveling there next year now because I saw your photo. I've literally heard that from people who I grew up with that hadn't talked to in 18 years. It's like that is super inspiring for me. And so, yeah, it gets to cover both sides of the coin because I get to experience these beautiful places. I get to capture them in the ways that I want and be able to have that as a potentially legacy piece for me that I get to leave behind and inspire others to try and go do the same. Go step outside.
That's awesome. Do you have a dream destination of somewhere you'd like to shoot?
Yeah, I'm torn. It's hard because
A lot of
anywhere,
good options.
but yeah, I think for me, Japan. I think I would
Hmm.
love to do like months in Asia. But
Mhm.
Japan, the culture, the architecture, the history, it's so rich. And I know this one's really overbaked, but like Iceland, I still think
Yeah.
it lives up to all the hype that it gets.
Hmm.
Fortunately, I've been through Europe and stuff and done a lot there and in the US, obviously. But yeah, it's hard, man. It's a hard question, but I think
Yeah.
those would be my top two, is like Japan and Iceland, probably.
Hmm. Yeah, those are definitely high on my list too. I've Yeah, hopefully one day. I mean, I've done a fair amount of traveling, but and I had an opportunity to go to Iceland recently. Sadly, wasn't able to follow through, but hopefully, maybe in the next couple of years, that'd be
You
awesome.
got time, my friend. You got
Yeah,
plenty of time.
exactly. No rush at all. And in terms of that last thing you were talking about, leaving legacy, purpose, I've heard doing some research, you often talk about creating with purpose, that mantra. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Yeah, I might get some hate for this one. And I fell into this a little bit. I think it's so easy. Again, it's all this like FOMO, this social media, the game. It's
Hmm.
any game,
Yeah.
professional career, creative career, financially, whatever. It's just keeping up with the Joneses a little bit. And so I felt like through my formative years of becoming a photographer and videographer, it's a lot of rinse and repeat. It's a lot of copycat work. And again, like I totally have fallen into this. There's like things like LUTs or presets. That's like I want the same look as the photographer I look up to. And it's really hard, especially early on, to feel confident in finding individuality in your work. I think that totally comes with time. And yeah, trends are there for a reason. Like some of the biggest creators I see are inspired by each other, and that's
Hmm.
fine. But where I got a little fed up was there was this, I don't know, I feel like it was this huge kind of peak of everything looking the same and everyone creating content just for the sake of creating it. Because it's a volume game. And I think, we touched on this maybe a little bit, but it's like, or maybe not, but like the algorithm and volume and quality versus quantity, I think there's this balance for sure.
Hmm.
And I think we got way out of balance for a while. I'm really happy to see video going back to horizontal. I'm really happy to see a lot of more individuality in edits. I think AI has its place for sure now too, for people to tap into more creative ways to express themselves. But for me, I just wanted to take this stance of like I'm gonna create with purpose. Everything I create, I'm gonna go into it with this bigger mission behind it to give it the justice it deserves, to give it the focus, the love, the attention it deserves while creating and kind of being fully invested in what I'm doing. And so for me, like that's where I take my work really seriously. And my fiance will be the first to tell you, um, I change a little bit when I get behind a camera. I change
Mm.
when I get in that mode because I get so locked in. And it's this version of me that doesn't come out otherwise, even in regular work, in my day-to-day job. And so yeah, it's just something I was thinking about again for younger creators or people just starting out, not just younger, but maybe you're starting now at later. I was thinking like, how do I create a site? How do I create a brand? How do I put myself out there? And that one it just stuck. It was like create with purpose.
Mm.
I didn't have to try that hard. Now a logo that I have not figured out. I'm really bad in that department. But like my tagline or the not even tagline, what I wanted to live by, how I wanted to create was everything with purpose. So that's how that came to be.
Hmm. It's a great line, and I think it's a great thing to really focus on. And also with that piece, congrats on your engagement. I saw,
Thank
yeah,
you.
get in. You're getting married in a lake in Italy, right?
That is correct.
Yeah,
Yes,
that looks
a lake in
amazing.
Italy. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next May, married in Italy, um, which again, crazy story. And whoever listens to this, I hope this piece sets in. You didn't ask the question about it, but I will tell it. And it's not a story or a piece of information I give out often at all. I don't know if I've ever talked in a more public setting about it. I lived out of my car for about a year. I didn't have much of a place to go. Home wasn't an option for me. Things weren't great, and I just didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what to do, and so I was living in the parking lot of the job I was working at. I got cool with the security there. They kind of helped me skate by with that. And I'd go in before work early to shower, and there was a gym on site, which was really nice. But I'd get ready for work, and then I'd stay until everyone left, and then kind of see myself out. And people were like, "Oh, Brian, you just work way too much. You work way too hard. You're here first every day, you're here last every day." I'm like, "Oh yeah, like if you only knew, this is kind of why and what I'm dealing with." And um, yeah, it was crazy. It's just a period of my life I look back on, and it's like to your point, like yeah, I'm getting married in Italy next year. It's like these. That's when I was 22 years old, 23 years old,
Mm.
and you, Ezra, you're right at
Yeah.
that period. And now I'm here, 10 years removed. If you told me this is where I'd be, the things I'd have gone through to get here, I would not like it's truly unbelievable, even when I look back on it myself, like for me to believe that these things would be happening. But yeah, so I don't know. Again, I get really like sentimental and philosophical about this stuff, but in that period of my life, it's sometimes it's so hard to see how you're going to get to that next step. But something that I realized very recently, actually, probably within the last 3 months, this kind of stuck with me. And it's that no matter how hard it seems in front of you, like that next day, if you got a big day coming up and you got something that you're totally dreading, whatever, you will survive. You have survived 100% of the days you thought, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. 100%. You have found a way to make it work, and you always will. And so, if there's a period of time where you got to grind it out, you could be getting married in Italy, within no time. So it's part of the journey. Yeah. Anyway, little tangent there, but um, yeah, the 10 years has been a journey for sure.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And yeah, congrats. So I had one more question, but I feel like in those
Yeah.
last two, your great advice, you kind of answered those. So I'll flip it a little over and hear about rather than advice piece, kind of that future piece where in that creative field, have you kind of thought about those long-term goals, kind of where you see yourself in maybe the next 5 years or so? and what that would look like for you.
Yeah, I think so. Something I've thought about creatively too is you reach a point where you've done enough spec work, you've done enough paid work, you've done a lot of creative work. And I've seen a lot of creatives hit this point, and it's like this is where power of network comes into play. It's a mindset of not scarcity and not hostility, like this is all me. Because for so long, I've kept a lot of the work I do close to vest. I'm
Mm,
shooting, I'm editing, I'm doing the storyboarding, I'm doing workflows, pre, during, and post production. That's hard to sustain. And when you become the one blocker, the one mover, everything, a lot rides on your shoulders. The pressure, the money, everything else. And so I think where my mind goes is how to then scale, like repeat yourself in that business model. Because to the points we've talked about, I have ambitions to keep shooting weddings because there's that fulfillment. They are very lucrative, it's a great industry to work in. I don't care what anyone says.
mhm,
Um, but then there's also like, well, what about, making the unsexy trades or the unsexy things that still need creative work? How do you make that sexy? How do you focus where maybe other eyes aren't? And so I think to do that successfully for me long term, it's building a team. And
mm,
so my years in marketing, my years as a people leader, in my professional world, I think again, don't hate on it and don't feel like you're not getting the progress you want. It's totally fine to work a normal job while chasing those dreams because now I'm feeling more ready than ever to take the skills I've amassed across both and then create around that. And so I think to scale anything, it takes trust, it takes people and time. And so that's kind of to your question, the next 3 to 5 years or so. It's trying to figure out the right place to deploy people, time, effort, energy. And so I've got my business planning well underway, a lot of Google Docs flying and strategy happening. But yeah, that's where the sights are set.
well, that's awesome. I'm excited to see how that journey unfolds and follow along with the national park journey as well. I'm very excited to see that. How many,
Appreciate it.
just a side note, how many national parks have you visited?
I'm about halfway. Yep,
Okay.
I'm about halfway. So yeah, what's funny is my fiance and I also, if you start dating, if you find a significant other, you got to find someone who meshes with that lifestyle because it is
Mhm.
not easy.
Yeah.
Um, it was her idea. We actually sold about 60% of our stuff on Facebook Marketplace, put the rest in a small storage unit in LA, and sold both of our cars to get one car together. And then we hit the road and we were long-term Airbnb-ing it for a month in each place, different states and stuff, because we realized all in, it was cheaper than our rent in LA. One, two, we got to go see really beautiful places that she hadn't been to. I wanted to redocument whatever, and we were just chipping away at that. Um, so there's ways to do it for sure. Like my job, I got to work remote. So, again, there's ways to balance that dynamic between a full-time job and, trying to go full-time creative work. And so, yeah, we did that for a little while and then out of nowhere just bought our first house. Again, if you told me that was going to happen, that was not on the 2024 bingo card. So, yeah, it's been an exciting journey. And again, I will remind anyone listening, I am 33 years old. And this year of my life has been the most change, the most creative work. Like business is booming, adventure is happening. So if you're feeling stuck at any point before this age, after this age, ebbs and flows, man. It like just ride the wave for what it is. Enjoy what you have. Make shit happen. Because it will happen for you. Of
That's awesome. Yeah, I love that. Well, Brian, this has been an amazing conversation. Thanks so much for joining me. And
course.
for all the listeners listening today, where can they find you? I know you got your social media and your website. What's
Yep.
the best place to find you?
Yeah, at Brian Clevesy, first name, last name, on Instagram is a great place to hit me up. My website, brianclevesy.com. I don't hide my stuff too easily, so you can find. Also, there's no other Brian Clevesy in the world that I'm aware of. So It's a very uncommon family name and very small clan. So you're not going to find another Brian Clevesy when you search for him. If you do, you let me know. That'd be crazy. But yeah, happy to, for me, again, just to put it out there, I'm happy to be a resource to anyone, whether it's life stuff, how to navigate that, creative work, professional, like how to balance all of this. It's not been easy. I have had no guides or mentors. It's just figuring it out. But one thing I love is to impart that knowledge on anyone who's curious. I love mentorship. I'm always here as a resource. And so anyone who is listening or, catches wind of this whenever, happy to be of help. Again, network is net worth, and um, doing good for others comes back around. So happy to help.
Appreciate that. Thanks again, Brian. And to everyone's listening, go check out Brian on all his socials and his website. And if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. And we'll see you guys in the next one.
Cool. Thanks, Ezra.